Good morning, good morning, good morning. And this morning, I'm in complete awe. I'm in complete awe of God because in the Bible, I don't know correctly, but the philosophy is that God was intentional, that He knows every head, that He crafted us with such the same craftsmanship of how when we look at the trees and the skyline and the different animals, the things that we know we didn't create. And I'm in complete awe of how I see that in me today. I love listening to podcasts and like doctor radio. Like in the morning, I got my radio station on doctor radio, which is kind of like different physicians and different, doctors kind of just talk about different subjects. And I love health. I love the mind of other peoples and fields that have mastered their fields that I admire. Like I love stuff in health and wealth and just people. I love the mind of people. I love to see how God just kind of works so amazingly in people, and that's why I love people, because I love to see that. I love those aha moments that I get to be like, ooh, you're amazing. Like, ooh, God did some stuff with you. And helping people either pull that out or just embrace that. I love all that. My hair is doing what it wants to do today. Whatever. But today I was in so much of an awe of how He did that in me, because I'm an author and I'm writing my first book, one of many. And that even sounds amazing, me saying that, because I've shied away from that. I always say, like, I try to put like a humbling kind of, but not even humbling, but a really, I kind of a disbelief. So it was a lot of disbelief in my humbling. So I would say inspiring. I'm an author because my mind thinks like an author. Now, like how I like health stuff, because I'm in the health field. I'm a health coach and I work with home health care companies. So I'm in that field. I do that. That's a part of my making. Authoring is because I love listening and hearing from other authors. And in hearing from this author, I always told when I was in the editing for my book, I always would say, every time they would send me just like a line to, whatever, correct or something or a suggestion, I would go and read my whole book. And every time I read my book, it would read me. And I'd be like, I needed that right now in my life. And I talk about the journey of wanting and having an outline for my book, but then really God, the Holy Spirit, the Him in me really guided me to do something totally different, to where my book became something I needed, let alone what it'll do for other people in the world. But it's just a reflection of how much power we really do have for our own healing, for our own growth. Like He places everything inside of us we need for us to be exactly who He's called us to be. And I've always said that. And I've said it, but sometimes the things that we say and the wisdom that we kind of get they hit home, but we don't really let them sink in, because there's so many things that does that in my life. And so today I'm really having an aha moment about that journey, because I'm listening to another author. He wrote this book called The Mosaic, and he's talking about his process of him versus what was needed to be said. So the characters in his book, he says the characters in his book, which was his life, which is the same journey I kind of went through in my book, where I thought it would take I knew it would take a while, because it was from a traumatic space. And it was not just me telling my story, it was me telling us part of my story that was very traumatic, that I was still dealing with, that I was still that I was still having nightmares about, and waking up in cold sweats, and fear. So I talked about the process of, I wanted to write, a certain outline of that book and, juicy details of what I've been through, because I could still experience them. I still now could feel how the hairs, what I was wearing, the feeling, the emotion, the wind when I go into those spaces. But instead of, I was able to experience those spaces, but my perspective changed. And the perspective that changed was the perspective that I needed for me to have the healing, for me to see what I needed in those moments, and not what happened to me in those moments, but what was happening for me. So that perspective of what was happening for me, and go with me, because this is going to be deep, and this might not register for later for you, but this is a sign to authors, because I've never talked to authors. This is for anybody that, if you have an inspiring story, if you have, because I'm going to have a publishing company, and the process I want to help everyone with, because everyone has a story. And most people think that your story, if it's not going to be like a bestseller, if it's not going to have the accolades, you don't need to write a book. You need to write a book, because that book is more, you always say you need you. And there comes a point in your life when you're going to have to live beyond who you are, what has happened, beyond that part, to get to exactly where you need to go, because there's so much more. You have years, there's so much that can be done in a day, let alone years. In order for you to get to those spaces, you're going to have to come to different perspectives, shifts, changes, growth. And in your book, when you sit down there and write your book, which is so powerful, which I love the arts, because art allows you to go to spaces that allow you to really propel your growth or your strength. Every artist, that's why I love singers, because you're able to transform or recalibrate your growth just by a song, just by invoking an emotion that allows you to move forward, that allows you release, allows others to release. We get that when we hear a song, when we move. I know movement is a release for me. So once I move and I dance and I put a piece out there, it's not just a dance. This is part of my growth. I just grew from doing this one dance. I just became more of who I need to be from this one dance. And that's what art does. So I love writers. Writing is another art form that allows you to propel and really kind of do that needle move that you need in order for you to be all that you are becoming to be. When we don't allow ourselves to stay in those creative spaces, whatever those creative spaces are for you, you hinder your growth. So I love the fact of authoring, me coming to this space in my life of being an author, and I think everybody needs it. I think everybody needs a book. Even if you're a kid, I don't care your age. My son has books. We've been reading books. He has stories. He remembers things, and those things will allow him to get to certain spaces. When we get stuck, when he's, just the process, because you have to release these things. You have to set forth out, so then you can be either grounded, rooted, or spring up. There's so many ways in which you release from who you are. That seed releases everything that allows it to go up, down, re-rooted, boom, boom, boom. All of that happens when it releases. So creativity is a way to release your growth, release your fullest potential. And not just within the art, just you as a human being. So I said that I went on a ramble, but I really wanted to get to the gist of just like, you really need you, and you need to, I just have to really say, of course, thank you to God, but remind myself that you are amazingly and wonderfully made. I'm just like, wow, the things that he's saying, that he wrote in his book, The Mosaic. He's an older author. He's probably like in his 50s, 60s, that he got revelations that he was getting as he was writing was the same revelations I was having as a 24-year-old author. That God allowed a wisdom and a revelation to set forth once I allow myself to be set free. I was having those moments where every time, still to this day, every time I read my book, I'm like, ooh, wow, aha moment. Like, and that was the space that you have to be in. So this is a call to all authors. Don't write the book that you think you're teaching. He said this, that you think you're teaching others. Write the book that you need. And I always said that I needed that book. And when you allow your space, when you allow that to be a space for you, it produces a lot more than even in entertainment. If you're doing fictional books, fictional books allow you to another level of creativity, to where you can see from different mindsets and perspectives. Even if they're more creative, then that still happens in the world. Those fictional books are not really fictionals, because they stem from a certain story. They stem from some part of that story is true, that the author has experienced, and then they allow the creativity to go and be released, and it takes you to different heights. But those things are happening in the world. Those stories are happening. Even if it's the lavish life of some rich woman, and she's meeting these amazing guys. Those things happen. Movies happen. That's why they hit home. That's why we're able to relate to them and love them, because these things happen. We love horror movies because the mind goes through so many tremendous things based on your life. Like, we experience very scary things in life, even if they're not as the little fictional guy crawling up the wall. Like, we think of these things. The mind does has these different aspects. And it's just to really provoke you to really allow your creativity to flow. Really allow those moments that come to you. Don't fight the moment of what the present is trying to say. So sometimes we don't allow the present to speak. We allow the past to speak so much, and that's our experiences to speak so much, but the present has so much to say. The present moment in time, when you get to writing your book as an author, is going to want to speak forth. It may say, hey, today we're not talking about X, Y, and Z. Today, this is happening, and allow that to come forth. Sit in those spaces when that comes. I had so many, my whole book was that space, where I was literally felt like somebody else at some point. At the beginning of my book, I felt like when I was first writing, how I wrote didn't happen in order. But when I first started writing, I felt like the greatest version of me was writing that book. Like, I was an out-of-body experience, to where I was like, okay. And that's how I acknowledged it at first. As I got used to it being what it was, I was like, okay, the present is speaking to me. The present will speak to you in every area of your life, in every creative space that you're in. And if you don't allow the present to speak, you miss the full functionality of really coming alive, of really being a human, really being a spiritual. You miss so much, because only thing you cannot bring your past experience into something. You have to. There's a certain level of the present that is uncomfortable, that is unfamiliar, that is familiar at the same time, with the mix of crazy, with the mix of structure. There's so much that happens in the present that if you don't allow yourself to be in that space, you miss out. So authors, allow the present. When you get into your book, whatever you want to write that day, write it. Whatever comes to you, write it. Allow that present moment to be the present moment, and that you're going to start creating work of art that not only that you'll be able to, give to other people, but that you'll be able to experience yourself, because you need you to. I always say this, you need you. So be encouraged, love you, and one author's note to another